Welcome, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Justin Carter. I'm a project associate with the Center for Rural Affairs. I'm joining you today from Lyons, Nebraska, where our main office is located on the homeland of the Omaha people. And I'd like to welcome you to the last session in our series, Models of Native Cooperative Ownership. It's been a tremendous series. I think this will be maybe the 11th presentation that we've done. They've all been facilitated by Pamela Standing. So I'd like to welcome in our speakers for today, Bijiibah, Kandis, and Pamela. They're gonna tell us a little bit about their experience working with Indigenous-led cooperatives and some things that are on the horizon for the next year. So I will go ahead and turn it over to you all.
Sure. So,
Thank you.
Kishay Kutanawan Dalaka, Kandis Quam, but that day Good morning. How was your evening? My name is Kandis Quam. I'm a child of the Golden Eagle clan and Folded Arm people. So, good morning. I'm live here from Zuni Pueblo, which is in New Mexico. We're about 2.5 hours from the biggest city, which is Albuquerque. 30 minutes south from the next town, which is Gallup, and another 2.5 hours away from Flagstaff, Arizona. So we're just kind of in the middle of everything. And just far enough, if you want something specialized, you have to go drive out to the nearest city. So we're pretty isolated. I happen to be the marketing and research specialist for Cooperative Catalyst of New Mexico, which I work with Pete. She is my boss or my supervisor. I know she hates that word, but I just like to call her boss just because it feels important. Like she deserves to be. You're important, B. Anyway, all right, Bijiibah. I'm sorry, I should say that. But yeah, also I happen to be a member of a cooperative, the Ancestral Rich Treasures of Zuni. And it's also a Indigenous cooperative. We're a cooperative of all Zuni artists. We're of Zuni artists for Zuni artists, basically what it is. We started in 2019, just before the pandemic. So we had a really good starting year and then the pandemic came. So that kind of, like all the other organizations, everyone across the world, more or less, we had to switch gears from thriving to surviving, especially since art is not considered a necessity. And that's basically all our income is art. We're a big artist community. I've said this before and lots of people will hear it again, but once you hit throw a pebble, you'll hit an artist, you hit another artist, and you hit another artist, and you'll probably hit it up. So, and just to give an example with myself, I'm an artist. My parents are artists, their parents are artists, and so on and so forth. It's actually more uncommon to find a person who has no talent in art. Everybody here has some sort of talent, except for a few people. Like I have no talent, but they have a talent somewhere. That's what my brother always says. He doesn't have a talent in art, but he has a very good talent in storytelling. He's a very talented storyteller, and I'm still trying to get him to accept that fact in that part of our art talent repertoire. So that's a little history on Zuni. We're a very small community. If you ever heard of Pueblos, we're one of the 19 pueblos in New Mexico. We're the largest, but we're also the poorest, which is also an unfortunate fact. And of course, with a small community, we don't have a lot of job opportunities. So what most people do is, since most of our talents have been passed down and we've been taught all these skills from the previous generation, we've been able to market these skills as part of our own. Like if you come from my sort of family, it's easier for myself to go into silversmithing or into carving, just because that's my family's background and it's a really easy way to market myself. But I happen to be very, I like to struggle, as my family like to say, and I went into painting, which is another thing hard to market yourself in. But with that, in the 1980s, outsiders came in and they pretty much started to dictate our market, and to have a solution towards that, to take back our market and to make sure that we were empowered instead of outsiders, the co-op was created. So, and that's a quick recap. I mean, yeah, that's a pretty quick recap. And recently, we have in plans for 2022 is we just had a grant recently with the local tribal program, Zuni Youth Enrichment Program, to help mentor the upcoming youth and how to become an artist, how to market yourself, what techniques that you can do, and just pretty much train underneath a master artist. You can learn all the mistakes that they've made, all the successes they have, all the techniques they have. You can learn from them. You can ask any sort of questions that they have, and it's about a couple months, a quarterly internship per artist. So there'll be different mediums that we can do. There's pottery, there's silversmithing, there's carving, there's everything that Zuni is known for that we'll teach. That's the basic thing that the grant covers. And we had the pleasure that we have gotten this grant. So we will be doing that in 2022, which is, I'm super excited just to have our youth learn all these skills that are pretty much cultivated by these giants in our field, people who have been working on their art longer than I've been alive. So it's just a real cool thing to experience and to see to come into fruition. So hopefully we'll continue to switch gears between surviving and into thriving. So yeah. Do I need a, a gap on Pamela or?
Are you going to be a holdout, Bijiibah?
Am I waiting for my cue? Is that my cue? Okay. Thank you, Kandis. Ja, het is je Bijiibah Begaye en is je shestina en is land is het van bushes je might so dat je although treaty me national so complicated I am by blood Tuscarora of New York. My mother ran away though, and she found herself a Navajo in Arizona. So I am born for the Many Goats clan, and my father's Navajo, and I'm enrolled with the Navajo Nation. I am Bear Clan, born for Many Goats. My maternal grandfather was Wolf Clan, and my paternal grandfather Red Running into Water Clan. And I was raised on the Navajo Nation in a community called Coal Mine Canyon, which is near and dear to my heart, and where I reside. But presently I'm using the internet in the city, so you know how that goes. I am the co-director of Cooperative Catalyst of New Mexico. Cooperative Catalyst of New Mexico, our mission is to empower communities to create local wealth through the development of cooperatives and through the creation of a generative cooperative ecosystem. We do this by serving as a resource for individuals, groups, companies, and other organizations interested in forming, converting to, or growing cooperatives. And I always like to point out that arts is our shining star, and Kandis does not get enough credit for all of the incredible work that's been done in the cooperative field. So thank you, Kandis, again. She's part of our CC&M team, and she's an incredible resource to us. We are currently working on a number of projects that I wanted to highlight, but just to put it out there, my role in the organization is very predominantly focused on Indigenous cooperative development. I work in the Southwest, and right now we're trying to develop best practice for Indigenous cooperative development. So Pamela, thank you so much for inviting us to this panel. I think this is a discussion that's going to be ongoing, and I certainly think that there's a lot to be done. So our work right now, the proposal that we have in place is really built around this understanding that there's been decades of forced removal, land dispossession, and policies of oppression that have hindered economic development opportunities for Indigenous people. So, you know, with fewer local options for goods and services, consumers are forced to spend their money outside of their communities. And that money rarely cycles back, especially in Indigenous communities that are living in rural circumstances like there are in the Southwest. So we're intending to utilize cooperative development and cooperative models to address that. And I would love to go into that further, but I'm not quite sure if we're just doing introductions at this point. So I'll go ahead and hand it back to you. Are we going?
Yeah, just go ahead, just dive in.
Okay. I think I want to start out a little bit with like, why for me cooperatives are important as an individual. I come from a community that lives below the poverty line, and that's a Western poverty line. And I want to emphasize that, there's Western perceptions and Western lenses. I come from a traditional community that still uses a pastoral society economic model. So we herd communally. Our dollar is really based off of our livestock. So my family still herds horses, sheep, cattle. All of those things are, where our wealth comes from. That includes traditional knowledge. But within a Western paradigm, we do, my community lives predominantly below the poverty line. And I think that I'm going to say in previous administrations, socially, there was a lot of conversation around what racism looks like and if racism existed. And when the pandemic hit, we were no longer talking about whether or not it existed. We were seeing it unfold. In my community, people live without running water or electricity. And it made national news, watching my grandmother on the news talking about her fear that this pandemic was having a bigger impact, and it was and is. And we're lucky at this point to be getting the services through the vaccination rollouts that they're doing, but that doesn't mean that we're not facing issues now. We have uncontrolled spread at this point. And I think when the pandemic initially hit, there was this perception that there were going to be outside resources that were going to come and assist our communities. And nobody came. It really was a bit of a shock. We waited, and then our government shut down. And even with these emergency notices going out, people weren't getting them because we were so isolated. And we really did have to come together. And it was from our traditional economic practices that we were able to build strength. And for me, that's really what the cooperative model is about. We started to look at our assets on a local level and did some asset mapping. And that's how we came together and started providing food for individuals. How do we get water in? How do we get, solar systems out to folks? Who can we bring in? And that really was a community effort. And I think for me, it sparked this drive and this understanding, that nobody's going to come for us. Nobody's going to save us. And it really is our responsibility as individuals and as community members to come together. And for me, the cooperative model fit seamlessly with our traditional perspectives and practices. And so, Charlotte, we got to do the Cooperation Works, and I just want to do a shout out to CW. I do sit on their board, and the incredible classes that they offered. So if any of you have an opportunity, I do suggest looking out and seeing what Cooperation Works has to offer. But it was through their program that I got connected with Cooperative Catalyst of New Mexico, and we partnered up with Southwestern Indian Polytechnic Institute. And I will leave that piece of it to you, Pamela, to talk more about, but all of the incredible work that we're hoping to roll out here in the Southwest is really about creating an ecosystem for Indigenous peoples. We're talking about, in the East Coast, for me, living in New York, there's cooperatives everywhere for childcare, for food, you name it. And then coming out here in the Southwest, people's perceptions of cooperatives, I always joke, it's thinking that Sam's Club, is a cooperative, and it's not. So, there's a lot of education that we need to be doing. We're going to be sticking together a panel that's going to really help us build out where the holes are. So we had initially been focusing on individual cooperative development, and it's really tiring, I'm going to be honest. To work with individual people at different stages and capacity is difficult. So what we identified was that there was a real lack of support systems for cooperative development. Financially, we needed to identify more funding sources for people. So that's something we're going to be really focused on over the next 3 years. We're also contracting with Co-op Cincy. They're out of Cincinnati, Ohio, and they use the Mondragon model. So there's going to be a 14-week program, and we're going to send a group through. We still have not finalized who that group is going to be. So if you guys know of anybody in New Mexico who's interested in developing, we have a couple of ideas, but we're still taking applications. So please send them our way. It's going to be a 14-week program, and it's going to encompass a train-the-trainers aspect. So that's going to be exciting for us. But it's really about jumpstarting cooperatives in Indigenous communities, and there are a number of ways to do that. So I'm going to pass it back to you, Pamela, because I'm hoping you can talk a little bit about the SIPI work, and I can contribute to that.
Osio negara, nuote unole dakwadoa, aniawi diji uwi, chalagi nidu wakwa. And I'm from the Deer clan, and our clan relationship is matrilineal. So if your mother is not a member, then you don't have a clan, and you have to find a clan that will adopt you. But all of our clan is unbroken through our mother's lineage, and it's passed from woman to woman to woman. And so I love when I hear other people introduce themselves and they talk about all their clanship relationships, and it's like, I just come from the Deer clan. So, but it's really beautiful. The women are the ones that run things in my community, and even around our ceremonies, it's always the women. They're the ones that set the dates, the times, when things are going to happen. They're the ones that come out and speak for each clan, under their clan arbor. So I really appreciate that. One of the things that I'm also seeing, to kind of build on what Bijiibah was talking about, is we are working on a couple of, there's been a couple of grants that have been submitted this year to really look at how can we develop an Indigenous curriculum for cooperative development that is really designed by us and knows what our communities need. Because some of the cooperative curriculum that's out there, it doesn't even speak to our communities. It has no concept. It's very, it's kind of, I remember when I took the training, and I really appreciated all the training that I got, but it was hard for me to make linkages back to my own community. And how can we do this? And, how can we use our languages? There's words in cooperative development that I find really offensive, and I have a hard time with them. So it's like, how do we change those words, like patronage? It's a very male-dominated Eurocentric model that is being used in the U.S. And in a lot of ways, it wasn't inclusive for communities of color. We were left out of that conversation. I currently serve on a board. It's called Shared Capital. They're the first cooperative credit union in the US. And they are, so when you guys are talking about looking for finances, they are funding BIPOC communities and cooperative development. They received a huge award from Treasury this last year, and some very substantial grants for cooperative development. And they're putting their money where they're saying. And so they're making investments in, I know BIPOC is the big buzzword right now, but they're investing in communities of color, and it's exciting to see some of these concepts. One of my favorite ones was a community in Chicago that was a traditionally Hispanic community of artists, and they were being priced out of their neighborhood where they'd always lived and communed with one another. And because it had become so gentrified, they were able to buy an old apartment building, and they converted it into a housing cooperative for those families so they could stay in their community. And their payments are a lot less than what they were paying where they were renting. Now they have the opportunity of home ownership that they didn't have before because it was a dream that they couldn't afford it. So, and another one where it's a group that's trying to disrupt Uber and Lyft in New York City. So it's kind of exciting to see some of the trends that are happening. And another way that the three of us have been connected is through some research with SIPI, which is Southwest Indian Polytechnic Institute, University of Wisconsin-Madison Center for Cooperative Development, Cooperatives First in Canada, Cooperatives Catalyst in New Mexico, and the organization I work for, the Minnesota Indigenous Business Alliance. And we're doing a study we're interviewing cooperatives, native-led cooperatives in the US and Canada. And there'll be a white paper published when we're done. And this is being funded through the US Department of Agriculture, National Institute for Food and Agriculture are the people that are funding this conversation and this research that we're doing. It's really been exciting because when we started about 4.5, 5 years ago, I was trying to find Native cooperatives. I'd been involved in one in my own community. It was the Native Women's Co-op. We started it back in the 90s. We never formalized it because there was no technical support or assistance anywhere for us in our community in Cherokee country. And so we winged it the best that we could. And we made it work for 10 years. It was amazing the things that we were able to accomplish for our community members. We have 14 communities on Cherokee Nation. So when we started looking for cooperatives, I started with a list of about 150 Native-led cooperatives. When we got done, we ended up with less than 50. And there were some that were kind of, when we called, they'd actually become a for-profit. Some of them got absorbed into the tribe as a tribal program. Others just disbanded. And, so it was real interesting to see who had survived, how they were still working. And then we even did more research when we published another publication about kind of that Indigenous journey into cooperative development into our communities. And we were able to do some case studies. And some of these communities, what inspired me, and when I talked to them, it was really interesting because they couldn't see what they were bringing to bear to their communities. And we heard from one of them this last week. It was Kuala Arts and Crafts. And to hear all of the things that this little cooperative does for their community, they're protecting the environment, they're teaching sustainable practices of how to gather the materials that you need to make the baskets and a lot of our traditional art. They're protecting the waterways. They've instituted art education from preschool all the way to high school in their BIE schools on the reservation. It's just, I remember when I called and interviewed her, she was just feeling really low the day that I called, and I went, "You guys are an anchor institution." And she never had thought about how much, it's kind of like when you throw a pebble into a still pond, how that ripple kind of keeps going out. And that's what they reminded me of, was that ripple of the beauty of their work and how they've touched so many lives in their community. And they've been at it for 75 years. And then I met and I heard about arts, and it was like, oh my God. I mean, I couldn't get a hold of you guys fast enough. It's like, oh my God, there's another one. And then we found out about other ones. And so there is a movement happening in the country. And I'm really hoping with the work with SIPI, with this partnership with all of us working together, that we will be able to talk about why some have thrived, what's causing some communities to have a stronger cooperative system, and just to learn from it, for us, hopefully, that we can gain knowledge and look at even some of their best practices. And they may not be intentional best practices. They've been just doing this to thrive and survive. But I think that when we're done, we're going to be able to kind of carefully call through that information and look at, we'll start to see threads, I believe, that will emerge. And so we worked for months developing an interview process, and really the kinds of things we wanted to hear. And then we developed kind of a business interview, and then we developed an online survey. So what's happening is we interview the organization, then we do the business interview. So we do a personal interview first to kind of learn about them, their community, what was that passion that started this, what brought people together, how did they keep them together, how did they keep that vision alive in their community, what do they see, what are the things they're hoping to see, like when you close your eyes and everything's working, what would it look like to them? And the other piece that then we're sending the survey. So we have an electronic survey. We'll send that out to their members. That's all being done in a program called Qualtrics. And don't ask me what that is, but it's got some sort of secret sauce in it. So we're working with an evaluator who's working on the personal evaluations. He'll be reviewing all of our notes. We also have 2 students from SIPI who their professor, Dr. White, has been working with them on collecting data in Indian country. And they've been getting very specialized training, like evaluation is sacred. How do we protect the data, the integrity of the data? How do we give that back to the community? And I think as we came together, we all wanted to make sure that this data was going to belong to the communities that we were interviewing, that it's not our data. It belongs to them. And we're hoping that we can tell a story that they can see how their cooperative has really the impact it's made in their community, but maybe even spur their imagination to look at other ways that they could grow cooperatives within their community. And we're working here to challenge our leadership to look at a lot of the tribal enterprises that don't necessarily make money, but if they turned it over to a worker-owned cooperative, I think it would change the whole dynamic of the business. And they would be working, around the clock to make that grow. And so those are things we're planting seeds. That's what I feel like. And the soil, to me, is really good for this seed planting to take place. And we've been so inspired. And I know Justin and I, after we listen to the interviews, we usually talk afterwards, and it's like, oh my gosh, what this community is doing, how they're doing it. And it may not follow the rules, but it's working for them. And they're adapting it to meet the needs of their community and their members. And I just feel like it's just such an honor to hear these stories, from these people about what they're doing to make their communities better. So if you want to chime in on SIPI, you go for it.
No, that was a beautiful overview. That was awesome. I was super excited about the work with SIPI because of the storytelling aspect of it. I don't think it's your typical research project, and the way that you guys had designed it was, that our Indigenous storytelling has value. And for me, that was an exciting process. And I'm excited to see how it unfolds. I think the other thing I wanted to mention was, and I apologize, my dog is being really needy right now. Kandis always highlights something for me about cooperatives that stands out, that within your normative capitalist Western model, it's competitive. And in our communities that are small, that creates hostility pretty quickly. So, with a cooperative model, it's about sharing resources because of that generative ecosystem and capital, right? Instead of like trying to get that $1, it's when we come together, we're able to capitalize on all of that for our communities. We're developing entrepreneurs, and business owners And that's something that I'm really starting to, I work in community land use planning, and we occasionally have these projects coming in, and it's sparking these other conversations for me about resource development and what kind of resources we recognize, right? And how businesses are owned, how wealth is distributed, and that generational wealth building and assets, and cataloging those things, that people, that we put more value on people, and relationships and community. And for me, that's an additional benefit that I don't know if we value enough, but it's community building. And for me, that's also important to generations. I'm a mother of 3. You can probably hear my kids running around right now. They're on winter break. But that intergenerational wealth building is significant. What is it that I want my community? Yes. What is it that I want my community to provide for my children as they grow, for my grandchildren? And I want them to have community. As I've growing up in a traditional community, and then going into the city, seeing that breakdown in community, it's real. That sense of place and pride that people collectively can come around. With a cooperative, there's. Oh, you want to come say hi?
Mama, do it for yourself.
Can you say hi?
F for yourself.
So, look, they're waving. Can you say hi? No, you can be shy like me. Okay. For me, it's about what I can hand down to my children, and especially in our communities that are struggling. I like the idea that we can put our heads together, and they're incredibly skilled people that I want my children to know that they can lean on, that they can build on these things. And, we tell these narratives about what is of value. And typically our communities don't meet that model. But when we take a hard look at traditionally where we thrived, then those things become important again in the conversation. And something about arts is, in the midst of a pandemic, the cooperative model is surviving, and it's providing income for people, and the resiliency of the cooperative model. I think it really speaks to the resiliency of our communities. So I think the SIPI project is going to open up a lot of conversation. I'm excited about the partnerships, and yeah. Kandis, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about the challenges that happened with arts during the pandemic, and just, you guys have pulled through. And to me, that was incredible, because we saw so many businesses, left and right, that were closing down. So.
Yeah, and art is not a necessity. It's especially in the very throes of the pandemic. And that's how we make our money. Most of the community does. I do. It was very hard, even just to get materials to work on your artwork. There was all sorts of delays. We couldn't get our material to work with, and there isn't buyers because they had to worry about themselves, which is very understandable. So we had to really think on our toes what to do and how to help our artists, because at beginning and end of the day, that's who we look up for, as our artists and our community at large. So we started thinking of these different initiatives. So we closed down our physical gallery. We just closed the doors just to make sure everybody was safe. On top of that, our village was closed down, so we couldn't have any insiders come by and visit the gallery to purchase anything. And also the neighboring towns like Gallup, they were closed down for a certain amount of time. So we would have to, one, get the gas money to go out to the far out towns, about an hour and a half away, or maybe 2 hours, depending if that town was closed down. We would have to get the gas money and the money to need it to get the supplies that we needed in whatever way that we could. We were very fortunate that there's individuals in our community that started up a food pantry from outside sources. They started all these sorts of initiatives like PPE. They had all these certain things, especially that when families were tested positive, all these people would come out and deliver these food boxes. They would deliver these PPE supplies, and they would so generous, especially in my family was affected. It was very heartwarming Try not to cry. It was a very emotional part of our history. I'm pretty sure you know, but just to have when you're trying to fight, just to take your next breath, just to know everybody has your back. That was great and just very heartwarming. Anyway, what the cooperative did was we came up with all these sorts of initiatives that would create money flowing to our artists. Like we had an in-house competition with a face mask. So when we had these competitions, we would pay our artists for participating and for the image. And once the face mask would sell, that design would portion of it would go to the gallery, and most of it would go to the artist. So that's another way we created a kind of a inflow for money to come in. Another way was online auctions. We would come up with auctions from our artists, would pay for the art piece up front, and then we would put it up for auction. And if it went over the retail value, then we would give whatever was left over from, let's say retail value was 200 and that piece sold for 300, that 100 would go back to the artist. So that's another way we supported our artists. And what kept us away from making a website at the time is because we were too busy. We were too busy on thriving and making sure all these sort of pillars we had up. But with the pandemic, we really saw like, hey, this is a thing that we really need to focus our energy on. So we went on to online and make sure everything was really well set up. And that's what we did for a really certain amount of time. We're still working on it now. But that's what we did during the pandemic, was really try and focus everything online. And that's how we started to thrive. And we actually got a donor, a very generous donor, and gave us a good chunk of change. You can use this however you want to, just make sure it benefits your community. And where we could have easily turned it towards the gallery and making sure it's all fixed up for winter, we gave it to our artists just as a thank you for sticking out with us. Here's something, just it's not much, but it's enough to give food on your table, to purchase firewood if you need to, whatever you want. We won't restrict what you will do with this money. Just here you go. Make sure you're comfortable for another day. Also, what was left from what we gave to our artists, we gave to our community. So a small micro grant for our artists, our community artists, pretty much fill out this little piece of paper, show us a piece of your artwork, and we'll give you money. And that was pretty much like, here you go, here's enough to put some food on your table again. So that's what we did when we were in rest for our community. And we were hit pretty hard too. It felt like there was we stopped asking who got sick, and we pretty much started asking who hasn't gotten sick. So, and we tried to accommodate everybody who was struggling. So we thought of our artists and our community at large, and we're fortunate that we're still here today. And it felt like, yeah, like things were closing down, everything was really dire, but it didn't matter in our terms of our goal, because we were here for our people. Beginning and end of the day, that's what we were here for. And it was very heartwarming to see everybody come in and really pitch in and really come in full force with their help when it felt very bleak. So it was very heartwarming to see everybody come together as one people, as we would say, one heart, one mind, moving together as distantly in a safe way, to come together to make sure we were still here. Because as Bijiibah said, we knew that nobody was going to come up for us. No one was going to help us. So there was a certain point where we had that hope, but that as soon as that hope diminished, we like, well, no one's going to help ourselves. No one's going to help, so we have to do it ourselves. And it was really beautiful to see. If I keep talking about it, I'll start crying, and I didn't hydrate enough to do that. So I didn't schedule enough. I didn't schedule that in my day. So I'm sorry. But yeah, it was very heartwarming to see everybody to come together in the co-op and the tribe at large, and to see that across the country, like these small communities coming together to make sure everyone's cared up. It was really great. Not gonna cry, I didn't hydrate enough for that. So so I'll pass it on to the others.
Thank you, Candice. And I just wanted to make mention, I dropped the link for anybody who's interested in their last minute gifts to zuningpuebloart.com and their gift shop. So take a look if you get a chance. And then there was a question also about the ecosystem and the train the trainers, if that'll be face-to-face or virtually, and we'll be offering that virtually. And if other states can participate, this first group has to be from New Mexico, but our plan is that this will catalyze ongoing train the trainers. So if you're interested and you're from out of state, please don't hesitate to reach out. Our plan is that this is going to have a ripple effect and build out that ecosystem. So.
Well, I'll just share quickly some of the things we're working with a statewide artists group here in Minnesota, and some of the things that we're learning. You know, we want to form a statewide buying and marketing cooperative or collective, but we've already joined collectively. We're working together collectively, and we're seeing there's some big holes in things that our artists need. And even down to, how do you deal with white privilege? How can you not feel like you're being kind of hurt over and over and over again? You kind of have to go through that experience again. We're doing some really interesting conversations. Gracie, who is Dakota from Sisseton, she's doing these, they're called Zoom and Tea. So we make sure that whoever the person is that's talking, we get them a mug and some native tea and before the conversation, so that it's like we live stream it on Facebook. And we're just talking about, you know, addressing things about, you know, that art was utilitarian. You know, it was something that we used every day, and yeah, we fixed it up, or sometimes we would embellish it when it went for trade, but these were products that we used every day. And it's, you know, it's art, you know, it's beautiful creations that we have. So we had a woman doing a talk on cradle boards. We just recently had a conversation about emotional labor and building emotional labor into our contracts. The other thing that we're doing is we're trying to organize a group of older Native women to kind of talk with some of our younger, you know, mid-age, younger Native women that are artists about standing strong. I think what happens a lot of times is that we've got these just unbelievably talented artists that are going into these communities with mad skills, even higher education degrees. And they go into some of these museum settings and they're talked down to, and then pretty soon their head's down and they're not being as vocal, and they're curating shows, but they have these curators that are kind of coming at them. The other piece that we're addressing is a lot of things with curation with contemporary art is very male, white male dominated. And they do not want Native artists involved in that because they want us to stay in a lane where arts and crafts, we're beads and feathers in their minds. And so when you have people that are kind of pushing the boundaries of traditional art into contemporary, we're having a hard time finding a place, you know, to grow that. The other thing that we're doing is we're working with the Indian Arts and Crafts Act board in Washington, D.C., and we're doing training with attorneys in South Dakota, North Dakota, Minnesota, and Wisconsin. They'll get CLEs. I think we can even go down into your neck of the woods, Christine, if you have Native attorneys that would like to become fluent in the Indian Arts and Crafts Act, because one of the barriers that we have here in Minnesota is that we have direct descendants, and there were some laws that were passed in the 60s. And so families actually got cut in half. So the older children are enrolled members, but the ones born after 1962 are not eligible for enrollment. And so there's something built into the Indian Arts and Crafts law that they can if they can prove direct descendancy, you know, parents, grandparents, they can go back 2 generations. The tribe can actually identify them as an unenrolled direct descendant Native artist, and it keeps them from getting in trouble with the law. They can be fined if they're saying they're a Native artist, but they're not enrolled with a federally recognized or state recognized tribe. So we're getting the attorneys trained that are working at the tribal governments, because more and more requests are going to go to our leadership asking for this type of acknowledgement. And then we'll be doing, I believe we're going to live stream it. I'm waiting to hear from Indian Arts and Crafts Board, but I think we can live stream the training in February for all Native artists. I think it's an important conversation, and we need to talk about these things, and we need to find ways that we can support each other in this journey. And there also is healing that is going on in our communities that's really different than a lot of other communities. We have trauma that we're carrying. And so it's not just starting a business, but how do we help, how do we provide those resources in our communities that help our communities also heal? What kind of role can the cooperative play in that with entrepreneurs and artists to support them? So those are some of the things that we're really exploring and will be exploring in 2022, is how can we grow that and provide more resources so that it makes it easier for people to become part of a group. And we keep focusing on the history that we have with trade and exchange. It's in our DNA and we've forgotten about it. The colonizers, the settlers have kind of, they've tried to erase that, but we had societies like, you know, we didn't have homelessness back in the day. Everyone had a place to live. We took care of the social welfare of all of the people in our community. And that was part of what the giveaway was. It was our banking system. And it was a way that we redistributed wealth, just like what we're doing with the cooperative. And so if we can keep tying those things together from our own culture, and then looking at how can we adapt that cooperative model for it to work with the values of our communities, is what we really want to focus on. And Bijiibah and Kandis, do you guys have any closing words, thoughts you'd like to share with the group? I know we can go on longer if we need to, so Justin's a really good sport.
I was just going to say, you know, I think a lot of cooperative development, and this is something even through the CW, but like you were saying, all of these trainings around cooperation didn't have a conversation for Indigenous peoples, and that was a reoccurring theme. And so, you know, these conversations have to be ongoing while we unravel what cooperative and Indigenous cooperative models look like. And I think there's pattern of talking about the beginning of cooperatives through the Rochdale Society and these men and all the things that they accomplished. And it's like, no, you know, within our societies, we might not have called them cooperatives, but they operated in the same way. And I think they were, maybe I would argue, more successful in supporting not only our communities, but our neighbors, and that we had that trade economy that spread all the way across Turtle Island. And so getting out of that thinking about, you know, where did the beginning look like? Here's what cooperative development looks like, that it sits within this framework, that we're essentially challenging that idea, and utilizing a lot of our values and our principles that are embedded within our culture to inform our cooperative development practices. And it's not coming from the 7 principles, you know, that are fed to everybody. It's about what's inherently of value in our communities, so that it reflects best practice within our communities on the ground level, where, you know, where communities and cooperatives should be coming out of. So I just wanted to say that. And then there was one other thing I wanted to add for folks who are close to New Mexico. We do have a contract with the state, and this was something I was really excited about, because the pandemic hit, and then you also saw like state and federal people coming to the table saying, well, what are cooperatives? How can we support them? New Mexico really did come to the table. So we have a partnership with New Mexico Aging and Long-Term Services Department and the New Mexico Department of Workforce Solutions to promote the development of caregiver co-ops in rural areas of New Mexico. So if there are folks who, and this was something we were talking about, like we're going to have in the long term, the boomers need people or systems, you know, people don't want to go into nursing homes. And when we look at the cooperative model, people want to stay inside their homes. So how do we create care for folks? That means that the caregivers themselves are getting the benefits. So we're also looking at young people who, for instance, out of my high school, they have a nursing program so that when you come out of it, you can immediately access the job market. So we're kind of hoping this might be an opportunity for young people as well, or people who already are working in the caregiving industry and want to be making those decisions. So there's that. And then I also just wanted to highlight, they're not off the ground yet, but there's a cooperative called Heartfelt, and it's for domestic abuse survivors. And again, you know, the role of cooperatives in addressing these issues, social issues. My little one's antagonizing me. He's hiding my keys. That's not nice. That you hear women who are penalized or who stay in these situations because they can't access capital. And with cooperative models, you know, there's, I don't know, go look for your magnets. So can you go get your magnets for me? With this cooperative model, there's a structure for them to step into, and that inherently impacts the rate that women would return to these situations. You know, how long it takes for women to escape these situations because they have no job. They can't access housing because they can't get a job, or they can't access daycare because they don't have a job. So, you know, this cooperative that's coming together is about empowerment. And these women too, they're creating a product. And this was what was, I guess, another exciting part of it is the trauma that you're talking about, you know, Pamela, that we don't want to have to advocate for people in these circumstances by asking them to retell these stories over and over and over, that you can support them by buying their product, by supporting their effort, and their stories are written into the fabric that they're generating, you know, and that they're able to stay within the safety of their homes. And you can be anywhere, and that's really important. So again, you know, that's, I think, a hallmark of the cooperative model is its ability to address these social challenges. So with that, I just wanted to say thank you. I took up a lot of time, and I appreciate everyone coming and yeah, for all of your time.
We're just glad that you two could do this on the fly. I love it. We didn't plan this months in advance. It was like 48 hours. We're ready to go.
Well, as soon as you sent the email, Pamela, I just showed it to be like, oh, like, should we do it? And I was like, duh. So let's go. We came running. So
Oh, you
and
guys
it's
are
just
the
a pleasure
best.
to talk to people about this.
Pull
So,
up the text. It was yes with exclamation marks. So yeah.
yeah, so we didn't even think about it. It was not even a thing.
Well, it was Justin who made the suggestion. I was just having a heck of a time getting San Javier. Holy, those guys. I think you guys are going to have to drive down there and camp out at their place because they've got such a beautiful story, but man, we can't. Something I learned from a friend of mine is that these tribal farm operations, they're so understaffed. And that's part of the reason that we're not hearing back from them, because they're covering such an enormous territory and it's just a couple of staff, you know, and oh man, well, you heard them, you know what they're like. We had them on a call with a Native American Agriculture Fund, and these guys hadn't slept in 24 hours. And man, they put on a good presentation. It was really beautiful. So, but you guys, just, I'm so appreciative of both of you and the work that you're doing. and the friendship that we formed. And I'm really grateful for that. And just that we've got these beautiful, talented Native women and these minds that are out there changing the conversation and challenging norms to make it work for our communities. So you guys are awesome. Does anybody have any questions?
I do. First of all, thank you all for being here and showing up for this presentation today. I really appreciate it. I wasn't able to be on earlier, so I might have missed a really good chunk of information. Is this going to be recorded? I guess that's my first question. Okay, great. I am working to start a cooperative with some community members here in Omaha, Nebraska. And my biggest challenge, and I think our biggest challenge, is like, how do we make the cooperative business profitable enough to sustain itself when most of our members are wanting to start their own businesses as well, and doing that in a way. So it's an agricultural, sorry, I'm really starting it. It's an agricultural cooperative, and our members are growers, farmers. Many of us, it's just like a city lot that we're growing on. But we want to also make sure that the produce is accessible to all economic levels. And so we're trying to figure out how we do that and then still keep the cooperative sustainable. So I guess, how did you all come up with the models that made your cooperative successful?
That's a super good question. I'm really excited for your co-op as well. Let's see. Well, how we started, I should just probably talk from my experience. But us artists, we've known each other for a long time, especially as show artists. We'll go out to different shows, these bigger shows, and we'll sell our artwork. That's how we know each other. And we've always kind of seen each other. We'll talk to each other, but nothing like too deep, like it's more like, how was the drive, whatever. So nothing about our business or our technique at all. But once the cooperative came around, it felt like we would have to need a cooperative because it would fit our kind of cultural values and how we interact with each other on a cultural level. And we work together, we make sure everyone is cared for in a cultural level, and how make sure we're all fed, we make sure we're happy. That's how we interact each other on a cultural level. So to make sure that it carries over into the business side, that was pretty easy for us. Just it kind of meshed well, and I kind of equate cooperatives like how we do clothing. Like capitalism is like a really small, itchy wool sweater, and it's really itchy, it doesn't feel right. But a cooperative felt like a really comfortable, like sweats. It felt like sweats, a nice pullover. It felt comfortable, I could move around in it. That's how it felt like to me. And it felt like it highlighted everybody's strengths, and it made it so where we could cover each other's weaknesses as well. So I think highlighting individual strengths and weaknesses, I think that's pretty good, just so you know how to work with each other. The main thing that was kind of a difficulty to get over in the beginning was, could we trust each other? That was another thing that we had to overcome. Like, can I trust you with my artwork? Because we do have issues with authenticity. Like, people will steal each other's techniques, and outsiders they'll just steal like images and they'll try and reproduce it themselves at a much lower cost. So that was a thing that we had to overcome. Like, can I trust you with my artwork? Can I trust you to sell it like you would your own? That's another thing that we had to overcome, and that was overcome quite quickly. Just because we have that rapport with each other. That's the thing that most people try and struggle with, is that rapport. And I think just gaining that trust, that's the first level thing, is trust. And once you build from there, it gets a lot easier. Everything will become a lot easier once you gain that base level of trust, which is, it sounds a lot easier than what I'm saying, unfortunately. But yeah, that level of trust is everything. And once you get that, everything will fall into place, hopefully. So that's how we got our cooperative off the ground. And we just got started within a year. So, but getting everything, and that our story is not common at all. So we heard that it'll take about a year to 2 years for it to become sustainable. or not sustainable, to become really profitable. So we were just kind of like the outliers, and we turned a profit within the first 6 months, which is amazing, with no advertising at all. We didn't even have a Facebook page when we did our grand opening. So that was amazing. That was all by word of mouth through our own clientele. We would tell our customers like, hey, we have a cooperative opening up, you should come by. And a lot of people came by. And we were just very fortunate that we had that to begin with. So that's a good thing to think of too, is marketing yourselves and just telling your clientele, if you have some already, like, hey, this is coming up, you should come by and support for the greater purpose. That was how we got started off, and that was really great. And it was from beginning to where we opened up was like that. It felt like it happened super quick, and it feels like it happened yesterday in a really weird blur. So I hope for the same thing for you too.
Stephanie, I'd like to, Charlotte left a message in here from NCDC. You might want to call and talk to her as well. And Justin has her information, but another person I'd love to connect you with is Leah Penniman. And she's with Soul Fire Farm. And she was one of our presenters. And Leah she has this fellowship where you can go, and it's all about food justice, food sovereignty. And she really works with communities, like even a small, your startup. I really wanted to encourage you to reach out to them, look up their website, Soul Fire Farm, and reach out to her and let her know that Pamela Standing referred you, because she's very, very supportive of that. And I'm just going to share something else that I'm seeing with communities of color. And I'm talking about Indigenous, Black, every community of color. We come in with a disadvantage when it comes to getting funding. And I'm seeing a model emerge, and I want to spend some more time on that model this coming year. But I'm seeing where communities of color are really effectively using, they start the cooperative, but they have a nonprofit on the side that helps to raise programming for the co-op and is a member of the co-op. So it's not a separate, it is a separate entity with its own board of directors, but it's a paying member of the co-op. And Leah spent probably 15 years and working with multiple law schools on developing a model on how you can do this. And I'm seeing even here, like we have a group called Black Table Art. They have 80 members now, and they're paying for their building. And they also have a nonprofit that's helping to raise money for some of the special programs that they want to do. And so I think there's, I know that in the cooperative world, that's a no-no. But you use grants too, don't you, Kandis? Do you guys get grant funding? I just think it levels the playing field for us. Because like in Indian country, our land does not have value to a lender. First of all, they can't take it. And you try to, where other people have assets and land ownership, they can leverage that in a loan and get capital that they need. We don't have that in our communities, and we don't ever want our tribes to do a limited waiver of sovereignty to get funding. So it's other ways that we can look at it. Something else, another group that I worked with, they're called Susu Collective. They're up in Vermont, and they did a GoFundMe page, and they actually raised the money to buy their farm. So there's different ways, but there's different laws in each state that you need to be aware of when you do that. But those are some of the ways that I'm seeing that our communities are accessing capital in just some very non-traditional ways that meets the needs of our community. Bijiibah, did you have a comment?
No, I was just gonna say you're so fired. Yes, I absolutely love them. Definitely check them out, even just for fun. They're incredible, and I love just the dialogue. The other part of it too, I'm gonna put my email in the chat, and then I have to jump off. But feel free to reach out to us. We can tap into our network in Nebraska to help you get like all the incorporation. I don't know if you guys have incorporated or you're still like in the startup phase. But that's always a question that we have people, who are co-op 101s, is what is the cooperative models? And there are a million different ways to organize your co-op. And it's really about your group. So, there's different models you can look at for inspiration, but really it's about what you guys want to do with it. So if you want some more resources, we can certainly help you out with that. And I'll go ahead and put my email in the chat for you.
Did anyone else have any questions? I know Bijiibah has to go, but Kandis she's a pro.
Oh, I forgot to mention, if you're going to the website, you probably can't see the store right now, just because we're on our winter solstice Lent until tomorrow. So yeah, the store will be back online tomorrow. So it's just in observance of our Lent. I think that's the English word to put it, but tashkwe is what we would say. So.
Well, we want to thank everyone, Wado, for being with us today and letting us share with you.
Thank you so much, Pamela. Thank you so much, Kandis. Yeah, it's just such an inspirational story to hear from you all. And I'm so happy that we've been able to do this and make this workshop series. It's really, and we've discussed it and thought about it before, but really what Bijiibah and you both talked about, there is such an ongoing theme throughout all these presentations that we've done on how a cooperative isn't just a place to provide an income or provide employment. It really is a community center that so often provides food security and education and relationships. So just very grateful that we've been able to do this and that you all have shared your stories with us.
Yeah, thanks for inviting us. It's very much a pleasure to be here. So as I said, we just came running.
Before folks jump off real quick, I do want to just throw our evaluation in the chat. I always forget this. There's the link, and yeah, that really helps us improve our program. So it should just take a couple minutes.
Do you want me to fill this out?
Nah, that's okay, Pamela.
Are you sure?
If you want to.
Well, I probably should, just so you get the numbers that you need.
Okay.
Oh, I know how that goes.
Oh no. Danica, you're right. I'm sorry. Today's presentation isn't actually on here because it was so short notice. This normally doesn't get as many responses, but I will send the evaluation out via email to everybody who was here and everybody who registered. So yeah, sorry about that. Thank you all.
Well, thank you for making this possible, Justin, so that we could just close it up with some amazing women just talking stuff.
All right. Well, everybody have a very happy holiday.
Yeah. Take
Thank
care.
you, everyone.
Yes.